Hello everyone, my name is Assaf Azouri. In this presentation I will focus on the key findings from a modeling study using several phase-resolving models where we assess the capability of the models in replicating realistic wave-driven coastal dynamics. This project was accomplished with the help of many people: Volker Roeber, Martin Giles, Melissa Iwamoto, Tara Owens, Janet Becker, and Douglas Luther. The financial support for this work was provided by the agencies NOAA, JIMR, and PAC-IUS. I'll start with a brief motivation. We're using three phase-resolving models that are fully nonlinear and weakly dispersive. These models are XBeach, FUNWAVE, and BOSZ. Our simulations are implemented over a two-dimensional domain, and the models are forced with highly energetic sea swell events that were taken from observations at a nearby buoy. The key question we're trying to address here is whether or not these models can be used to replicate realistic wave dynamics at the coast and in a small harbor. Let's look now at the study area and the available observations. This is the chain of main Hawaiian islands. Our study region is located on Oahu Island, the second island from the top of the map. We focus on an area on the north shore of the island. Our computational domain is contained within the blue rectangular box. Within this domain, we have observations from a small boat harbor called Haleiwa Harbor, and at the coast we have observations over the reef at Mokuleia. We now take a closer look at Haleiwa Harbor. The magenta squares mark the four observational sites where we collected bottom pressure records. Focusing now on Mokuleia, we have bottom pressure records from these three sites. In all of the analyses that follow, the pressure data was converted to sea level using linear wave theory. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the modeling parameters. The boundaries of our computational domain are 12.2 kilometers in the alongshore and 10.2 kilometers in the cross-shore. We implemented a uniform grid spacing of 7 by 7 meter grid cells. For friction, we used the Manning formulation with a coefficient of 0.035. In these models, wave forcing is implemented using a wavemaker, which is located at or very close to the offshore boundary. Directional spectra of two real swell events were obtained from Waimea Buoy, the site that is marked here with a red star near the upper corner of the domain. These are high amplitude events with long peak periods. The computational domain is oriented such that the perpendicular to the offshore boundary is pointing towards 315 degrees. And the two swell events propagate within a few degrees from that line. For that reason, we did not use lateral wave makers in these simulations. The simulations were carried for 4 hours of wave forcing. The inputs that I just mentioned were implemented to all three models. In the next couple of slides, we will look at the key results from this study. Here we have a paraspectral density plot at observational site number 4 inside the harbor. In the vertical axis, we have the paraspectral density expressed in units of centimeters squared per cycle per hour. The horizontal axis is frequency in units of cycle per hour at the bottom, and periods in units of seconds and minutes at the top. The vertical distance between the two black lines at the bottom is the 95% confidence interval for independent spectral estimates. As indicated in the legend, the black curve corresponds to observational data, and the orange, red, and blue curves correspond to model data obtained from XBeach, FUNWAVE, and BOSZ, respectively. This color code will be used throughout the presentation. We can now look at the spectra at all 4 harbor sites. Qualitatively, we can immediately see that at all 4 sites there is good overall agreement between all 3 models and the observations. The models are able to replicate the resonance structure that is observed inside the harbor, as we see from the various minima and maxima that overlap well with the observations. Another thing that we can see is the strong spatial dependence of the model response. This is because for a given resonance frequency, one site may be located at a node, while another site will be located at an antinode. We applied a cross-spectral analysis between harbor sites 1 and 4. As you can see in the map, it is the pair with greatest spatial separation from each other. The upper panel of the figure is the coherence amplitude, and the lower panel is the coherence phase as a function of frequency. The horizontal black line in the coherence amplitude plot is the 95% level of no significance. First, we know that at periods longer than approximately 6 minutes, all model and the observation indicate that the two sites are highly coherent and they are in phase. The motion at the long period is on scales larger than the harbor, so all points within the basin are moving together in phase. At shorter periods, we see several dips in coherence amplitude levels that are accompanied by approximately 180 degrees phase jumps in coherence phase. Here, this appears to be near the periods of approximately 5 minutes and 70 to 80 seconds. This is a signature of resonant response in the harbor. What is important here is that the model reproduced those dips and corresponding phase jumps at the observed frequencies. This indicates that the wave field produced by the model is composed by proper wave scales. At periods shorter than approximately 60-70 seconds, there is little agreement between the coherence phase of the model and the observation. This is because the coherence amplitude is statistically insignificant at the 95% level, and the corresponding coherence phase values are meaningless. Here are pulse spectral density plots at the three Mokolea sites. These sites are located over an uneven lava-type reef bottom at depth of 12 meters, 6 meters, and 2 meters. Similar to the results we obtained inside Haleiwa Harbor, here there is good qualitative agreement between all models and the observations. At the offshore-most site, we see that all models produce the proper spectral levels, especially around the peak frequency of the swell, which is 18 seconds. At that site, there is minimal spectral structure at infragravity periods, since this site is located outside the surf zone. Getting closer to shore through the surf zone, the spectra at the remaining sites reveal what we expect, a reduction in spectral level at sea and swell frequencies, and a transfer of some of that energy into certain infragravity frequency bands. A coherence analysis between sites 1 and 2 and comparison of the modeled and observed curves shows again that the wave field produced by the models is composed by proper wave scales. The phase wrapping in the coherence phase plot is the signature of progressive wave motions. It is seen at sea and swell frequencies and high infragravity frequencies. It is hard to determine from this result whether or not we also have standing waves at certain period bands. Results that will be shown later in this presentation will address that question. At this stage, we wanted to quantify the deviation of the modeling results from observations. We chose the normalized root mean square error of the sea level pulse spectral density as our metric, and we carried the calculation separately in several infragravity bands. In the equation, infragravity subscript I represent the ith infragravity band, and the normalization factor in the denominator is the total observed pulse spectral density in the ith infragravity band. We carried this calculation separately for each of the 7 observational sites. Smaller RMSE values for a given model correspond to better agreement between the model and observations. As you can see, the RMSE values are low for all models, and no model can be identified as the obvious winner here. In the following analysis, we extract the free surface data from the models at individual points along several shore normal profiles and calculate the autospectra along these profiles. These profiles are shown as a white line on the map. One profile overlaps with the 3 observational sites, and there are 10 additional profiles from each site, separated from each other by 20 meters. The plot on the left shows the depth along these shore normal profiles. The solid and dashed depth profiles on the left figure correspond to the solid and dashed profiles from the map. Note that the solid line profiles have a steep reef edge fall-off, whereas the dashed profiles have a more moderate reef edge fall-off. In the next slides, we will show integrated power spectral density in the sea and swell band and selected infragravity bands. All solid line profiles and dashed line profiles are averaged separately. The procedure is repeated for each of the 3 models. The result is seen here for several period ranges. On the left, we have the sea and swell band, 5 to 30 seconds, and infragravity bands, 30 seconds to 1 minute, 1 to 2 minutes, and on the right, we have infragravity bands at periods longer than 2 minutes. Again, in these plots, remember that the solid curves represent the average of the steep reef edge profiles, and the dash curve represent the more moderate reef edge profiles, as is seen in the upper panels here. We also overlay the corresponding integrated power spectral density at each of the 3 observational sites. These are marked with magenta circles, and the error bars are also shown. Although the observations we have provide us only 3 data points, overall, the spectra produced by the models are in qualitative agreements with the observed spectra. Going from offshore towards shore, note how in all models the spectral levels in the vicinity of the reef edge decrease in the seen swell band and increase at all of the infragravity bands. Furthermore, even though the spectral amplitude levels vary by up to a factor of 2 in some cases, they all produce a cross-shore structure that resembles the one of standing waves. In each of the infragravity bands, there is a maxima at the shore and another one at the reef edge. In between those two, the number of minima and maxima increases from the longer period to the shorter period infragravity band. For instance, in the 4 to 8 minute band, there is a total of 2 maxima. In the 2 to 4 minute band, there are 3 maxima, and so on. We now use the model outputs to generate 2-dimensional spectral maps for the nearshore portion of our computational domain. In this slide, we focus on examples for the 1 to 2 and 2 to 4 minute bands. The upper panels correspond to the BOSZ model, the middle panels correspond to FUNWAVE model, and the bottom panels correspond to XBeach model. A quick visual inspection of these maps shows us that the 2-dimensional wave field is qualitatively consistent among the 3 models. Although in some areas of the domain the models do not agree on the spectral levels, the spatial distribution of power spectral density is consistent among the 3 models. Something that stands out in the maps of all 3 models is standing wave patterns that are uniform in their longshore. This is especially seen in the 2 to 4 minute maps. We also note that the uniformity in their longshore is interrupted by bathymetric features such as deep channels, embayments, and harbors. To highlight the standing wave patterns, we will look at the maps of other period ranges. We will focus on a small portion of the domain to illustrate that. The black box on the bottom left map indicates the extent of that domain. The period ranges are shown above each panel. These maps reveal the standing wave patterns that we saw in the earlier slides. In addition, we also see how the separation between consecutive maxima or minima increases as we go from short period to longer period infragravity bands. To conclude, we saw that all models can be used to simulate a realistic wave field with gravity and infragravity waves in a complex fringing reef environment. When they are properly used, these models can serve as a powerful tool to assess coastal response to sea and swell forcing. And lastly, when they are implemented over large enough domains, they can be used as a forecasting tool for predicting the variability at the coast and inside embayments and harbors. Thank you very much.